The conference room had become a command center, but not the one Admiral Korath had planned. Steve Brooks worked frantically at the alien communication systems, his fingers dancing across controls that should have been impossible for a human to understand. 3 days of careful study had paid off as he seized control of Nexus Prime's critical systems. "I have access to their fleet coordination network," Steve announced. "The Zephyrians are trying to reorganize, but their command structure is falling apart." Through the main display, they could see the space battle raging around the station. Admiral Kane's hidden fleet was wreaking havoc on the Zephyrian forces, using tactics the aliens had never encountered before. Human ships darted between the larger alien vessels like angry hornets, striking at weak points and vanishing before return fire could find them. Amy Walsh monitored the biological agent's effects on the Zephyrian delegation. "Their neural systems are severely impaired. Reaction times are down by 60% and their coordination is almost non-existent." Admiral Korath slumped in his chair, his large, dark eyes struggling to focus. "This is impossible. The Confederation has maintained order for 3,000 years. We are the dominant species in this sector." "We're the dominant species," Lisa Carter corrected. "You made the mistake of thinking human diplomacy was a sign of weakness. Now you're learning the difference." Ben Hayes was studying the tactical display with professional interest. "Kane's doing exactly what we planned. He's not trying to fight a conventional battle. He's turning their own formation against them." The Zephyrian fleet had been perfectly positioned for their planned massacre of helpless human diplomats. But when armed human warships materialized in their midst, the formation became a trap. Ships found themselves unable to fire without hitting their own allies. Command vessels were isolated and vulnerable. "Brooks, can you access their shield frequencies?" Ben asked. "Already on it, Colonel," Steve replied, his hands never stopping their work on the alien controls. "Transmitting shield harmonics to all human units now." On the display, they watched as human weapons began penetrating Zephyrian defenses with devastating effectiveness. The aliens' technological advantages meant nothing when their enemies knew exactly how to counter them. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system. "Defiance to diplomatic team. We're taking heavy fire but holding position. The station's shields are down." "Confirmed, Captain," Lisa replied. "Maintain position and prepare for Phase 2. Phase 2 was the part of the plan that even Lisa found disturbing. But the Zephyrians had chosen to use a peace conference as cover for genocide. Humanity's response would be proportional to that intent. "Amy, release the second biological agent," Lisa ordered. Dr. Walsh hesitated for just a moment. "Ambassador, that one is designed for broader distribution through their ship's life support systems." "I know what it's designed for. Do it." Amy activated a second device, one that would spread through the station's air recycling system, and eventually to any Zephyrian ship that docked. This agent was more potent, designed to incapacitate entire crews rather than just impair their functions. Steve Brooks had found something even more valuable in the station's computers. "Ambassador, I have access to their strategic database. Complete fleet positions, colony locations, everything." "Download it all," Lisa ordered. "Military intelligence will want every byte." Ben Hayes was coordinating with human forces throughout the system through the captured communication array. "Admiral Kane, this is Hayes. The station's defensive grid is completely down. You have clear shots at their command ship." Kane's response was immediate. "Understood, Colonel. All units focus fire on the Zephyrian flagship." Through the viewports, they watched as concentrated human firepower struck the massive alien command vessel. The ship's shields flared and failed under the assault, and secondary explosions began rippling along its hull. Admiral Korath watched his flagship die with glazed eyes. "The Confederation will never surrender to primitive upstarts." "The Confederation no longer exists," Lisa informed him. "Your member species are already breaking away. We're receiving surrender requests from 4 different governments." This was true. Steve's monitoring of alien communications showed panic spreading through the Zephyrian alliance. The other species that made up the Confederation had joined reluctantly, held together by Zephyrian military dominance. With that dominance shattered, the alliance was collapsing. "The Altarians have formally withdrawn from the Confederation," Steve reported. The Centauri delegation is requesting immediate negotiations with human forces. Ben smiled grimly. Nothing breaks up an alliance faster than military defeat. These species were never loyal to the Zephyrians anyway. The battle in space was becoming a rout. Human forces were systematically destroying or capturing Zephyrian vessels while taking minimal casualties themselves. The aliens' superior technology was useless against enemies who knew all their weaknesses and had prepared specifically to exploit them. Captain Morrison's voice came through again. Admiral Kane reports enemy flagship has been destroyed. Admiral, Korath's second-in-command is requesting terms for surrender. Denied, Lisa said immediately. This isn't a conventional military engagement. They tried to commit genocide under cover of peace talks. The response needs to match the crime. Jake's voice carried surprise. Ambassador, are you ordering no quarter? I'm ordering appropriate justice, Lisa replied. Any ship that surrenders will be spared, but there will be no negotiations with the command structure that planned this atrocity. Amy Walsh looked uncomfortable with the direction things were taking. Lisa, we need to be careful not to become what we're fighting against. We're not, Lisa assured her. We're demonstrating why you don't try to exterminate humanity through fake diplomacy. The lesson needs to be clear enough that no other species makes the same mistake. The station shuddered again as more human ships docked. Marines were boarding to secure critical areas and capture intelligence materials. The Zephyrian crew, affected by Amy's biological agents, offered little resistance. Steve Brooks announced another development. I'm receiving communications from the outer colonies. 3 Zephyrian systems have declared independence and are requesting human protection. Ben Hayes studied the expanding intelligence picture. Their entire empire is falling apart. Once word of this defeat spreads, every subject species will be looking for a way out. Admiral Korath tried one last time to regain control of the situation. Even if you defeat us here, the Confederation has hundreds of systems. You cannot conquer them all. We don't want to conquer them, Lisa replied. We want them to understand that humanity is not prey. Any species that tries to exterminate us will face the same fate you're facing now. Through the communication system, they could hear Admiral Kane coordinating the final phase of the battle. All human units. Enemy forces are scattered and fleeing. Pursue and destroy any ship that refuses to surrender. The space around Nexus Prime was now filled with debris from destroyed Zephyrian vessels and the running lights of human ships in pursuit of fleeing enemies. What had been planned as a massive alien victory had become their complete destruction. Brooks, what's the status on the station's database download? Ben asked. 90% complete, Colonel. We'll have everything. They know about this sector of space. Lisa looked at Admiral Korath, who was barely conscious now. Your plan was actually quite good. Invite the enemy leadership to peace talks, then eliminate them while their forces are scattered. It would have worked against any normal species. She paused, making sure the alien admiral was still listening. But humans aren't normal. When we come to the peace table, we bring everything necessary to turn it into a battlefield. And we always plan to win. Dr. Amy Walsh sat in the station's medical bay, ostensibly conducting routine health screenings on the diplomatic staff. In reality, she was studying every Zephyrian who entered her field of view. 3 days of careful observation had confirmed her worst suspicions. The alien crew members showed consistent signs of combat preparation. Their hormone levels indicated high stress and anticipation, the kind of chemical changes that preceded military action. More telling was their behavior patterns. They moved with the careful efficiency of soldiers preparing for battle, not the relaxed attitude of peacekeepers hosting diplomatic talks. Amy made careful notes in her medical files, using code words. That would mean nothing to alien observers. Each observation added another piece to the puzzle. The Zephyrians were definitely planning something violent, and it would happen soon. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Steve Brooks was having his own revelations in the station's communication center. He had volunteered to help establish secure channels between the human delegation and Earth Command, which gave him access to the station's technical systems. What he found was disturbing. The communication arrays were handling massive amounts of encrypted traffic, far more than any diplomatic mission would require. Signal analysis showed the transmissions were going to military frequencies across multiple star systems. Someone was coordinating with a large number of ships. Steve traced the signal patterns and discovered something even more alarming. The encrypted messages were using Zephyrian military codes, specifically the ones reserved for major fleet operations. The timestamp showed the communications had been increasing in frequency over the past week, reaching peak intensity in the last 24 hours. He carefully copied the data patterns onto a secure storage device, being careful not to trigger any security alerts. The evidence was clear that the Zephyrians were coordinating some kind of major military action, with the peace talks serving as either cover or bait. Colonel Ben Hayes was conducting his own investigation through more direct means. His morning exercises took him through different sections of the station, allowing him to observe the layout and defensive positions. What he saw confirmed his tactical instincts. The station's design was not optimized for peaceful conferences. The diplomatic areas were isolated from critical systems, easily sealed off from the rest of the structure. The docking bays were positioned to prevent quick escape, and the defensive weapons were all pointed inward as much as outward. Ben also noticed the deployment of Zephyrian security forces. They were not positioned to protect diplomats but to control them. Guard posts covered every possible escape route from the diplomatic sector. Heavy weapons were positioned at key choke points. The entire setup screamed military operation disguised as peaceful meeting. During his reconnaissance, Ben encountered Lieutenant Commander Sarah Price from the Defiance. She was supposedly delivering routine supplies, but Ben recognized her real mission immediately. "Any interesting sightseeing, Colonel?" Sarah asked casually as they passed in a corridor. "Very educational," Ben replied. "The architecture here is quite remarkable. Lots of interesting defensive features." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I'll make sure to include that in my tour report. Captain Morrison will find it fascinating." The brief exchange confirmed what Ben suspected. Jake was not sitting idle on the Defiance. The human military was preparing for trouble, even while maintaining the appearance of peaceful intentions. Ambassador Lisa Carter was playing the most dangerous game of all. During the formal negotiation sessions, she presented herself as exactly what the Zephyrians expected, a naive human diplomat grateful for their generous peace offer. "The United Earth government is very interested in establishing permanent peace," she told the Zephyrian Council. "We're a young species, still learning our place in the galaxy." Ambassador Veleth and his colleagues showed obvious satisfaction with her humble approach. They exchanged glances that Lisa pretended not to notice, clearly pleased that the humans were accepting their inferior position. But Lisa was gathering intelligence with every word. The Zephyrian negotiating position was too rigid, their terms too specific. They were not actually negotiating at all but following a predetermined script. More importantly, they kept making references to time frames that suggested urgency. "We hope to conclude these discussions within the next 2 days," Veleth mentioned several times. "The Confederation has other pressing matters that require attention." Lisa filed away every detail, every slip of the tongue, every nervous gesture. The aliens were working toward a deadline, which meant their real plan had a specific timing. During a break in negotiations, Lisa managed to gather her team in her quarters for a brief update. Jake had returned from the Defiance with additional intelligence. "Our long-range sensors are picking up unusual activity in the outer system," Jake reported quietly. "Ship movements that don't match normal patrol patterns." Amy shared her biological observations. "Every Zephyrian on this station is showing signs of pre-combat stress. Whatever they're planning, it involves violence." Steve presented his communication analysis. "They're coordinating with at least 50 ships, possibly more. The message traffic suggests a major fleet operation." Ben outlined his tactical assessment. "This station is a trap, plain and simple. We're isolated in a section that can be sealed off easily. All the defensive positions are designed to keep us here, not protect us." Lisa processed all the information carefully. "So we're facing a coordinated military operation disguised as peace talks. They plan to eliminate us and probably attack our colonies while our leadership is neutralized. That would be my assessment, Ben agreed. The question is what we do about it. We turn their plan against them, Lisa said firmly. If they want to use fake diplomacy as a weapon, we'll show them how it's really done. She outlined her counter strategy. They would continue playing their assigned roles while secretly preparing for action. Jake would coordinate with Admiral Peter Kane's forces, which had been shadowing the diplomatic mission at a discreet distance. Ben would identify the station's critical vulnerabilities. Amy would prepare biological countermeasures. Steve would be ready to disrupt their communications at the crucial moment. Most importantly, they would let the Zephyrians believe their plan was working perfectly right up until the moment it backfired. Over the next day, the human team put their counter plan into motion. Lisa continued to play the grateful diplomat, accepting Zephyrian demands with apparent gratitude. Her performance was so convincing that Velith began showing signs of smug satisfaction. Jake maintained regular contact with his ship, while secretly coordinating with hidden human forces throughout the system. The Defiance was not alone, despite appearances. Admiral Kane had positioned assets throughout the region, disguised as civilian vessels and mining platforms. Ben identified the station's critical systems and began planning how to disable them at the right moment. The Zephyrians had built an impressive trap, but every trap had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who understood its design. Amy synthesized a biological agent specifically designed to affect Zephyrian neural systems. It would not kill them, but would severely impair their coordination and decision-making abilities. She disguised it as routine medical supplies. Steve mapped the station's computer networks and identified the key nodes that controlled communications and life support. He also established encrypted channels with human forces that the Zephyrians could not detect or intercept. As the second day of negotiations drew to a close, the tension was becoming unbearable. The Zephyrians were clearly preparing for some kind of action, their stress levels reaching critical points. Several times, Ambassador Velith checked his chronometer with obvious anticipation. Lisa concluded the day's session with apparent satisfaction. I believe we're making excellent progress. Tomorrow should see the finalization of our peace agreement. Indeed, Velith replied, his relief obvious. Tomorrow will be a historic day for both our species. As the human delegation returned to their quarters, they knew the next day would indeed be historic, just not in the way the Zephyrians expected. The trap was set, but it was humanity's trap now, and the aliens had walked into it willingly. The third day of negotiations began like the others, with formal pleasantries and careful diplomatic language. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat across from the Zephyrian delegation, maintaining her role as the grateful human representative. But she could sense the change in the air immediately. Ambassador Velith's stress indicators were off the charts, according to the subtle signals Amy Walsh was sending from her position near the medical station. The alien diplomat kept checking his chronometer, and his skin showed the faint color changes that indicated extreme anticipation in his species. Today we finalize the peace agreement between our peoples, Velith announced with obvious satisfaction. The Confederation is pleased that humanity has chosen the path of wisdom. Lisa smiled warmly, playing her part perfectly. The United Earth government is grateful for your patience and generosity. We look forward to a long and peaceful relationship. What happened next changed everything. The conference room doors suddenly opened, and a new figure entered. This was not another diplomat, but clearly a military commander. The being was larger than the other Zephyrians, with darker skin markings that indicated high rank in their society. His presence immediately changed the dynamic in the room. I am Admiral Korath of the Confederation Fleet, the newcomer announced. I bring greetings from the Seven Worlds and news of great importance. Lisa felt her stomach tighten, but she maintained her diplomatic smile. We are honored by your presence, Admiral. Korath moved to the central display, which immediately showed a tactical readout of the surrounding space. What Lisa saw made her blood run cold, though she was careful not to show any reaction. Over 200 Zephyrian warships surrounded Nexus Prime. They had appeared as if from nowhere, their positions carefully coordinated to prevent any escape. The display showed ship classifications that represented the bulk of the Confederation's military might. As you can see, Korath said with obvious pride, the Confederation has assembled significant forces to ensure the peace process succeeds. Ben Hayes, sitting quietly in his observer role, recognized the formation immediately. This was not a defensive deployment, but an attack formation designed for maximum destruction. Every ship was positioned for optimal firing solutions on targets that might try to flee the station. "Impressive," Lisa managed to say. "Such a demonstration of power certainly emphasizes your commitment to peace." Korath's expression changed, the diplomatic mask falling away to reveal something much more sinister. "Indeed, Ambassador Carter. The Confederation is very committed to achieving a permanent solution to the human problem." The word problem hung in the air like a threat. Lisa felt the moment when pretense finally ended and truth emerged. "You see," Korath continued, "the Confederation has ruled this sector for 3 millennia. We have maintained order and stability through careful management of younger species. Humanity represents a unique challenge to that order." Amy Walsh watched, the alien admiral's biological indicators with growing alarm. His stress levels were dropping rapidly, which meant he was becoming more comfortable with the situation. That was a very bad sign. "Your species shows disturbing tendencies," Korath explained, beginning to pace around the conference table. "You are aggressive, unpredictable, and refuse to accept your proper place in the galactic hierarchy. These traits make you unsuitable for integration into civilized society." Steve Brooks felt his hand move toward the concealed communication device in his jacket. The moment was approaching when subtlety would no longer matter. Therefore, Korath announced, the Confederation has decided that humanity must serve as an example to other upstart species. Your elimination will demonstrate the consequences of challenging established order. Lisa Carter looked directly into the alien admiral's large, dark eyes. "I see. And you believe you can accomplish this elimination how exactly?" Korath seemed genuinely surprised by her calm response. "Ambassador, perhaps you do not understand the situation. Your entire leadership structure is here on this station, surrounded by overwhelming military force. Your home fleet is scattered across dozens of systems, unable to respond quickly enough to prevent your destruction." "I understand perfectly," Lisa replied, reaching slowly into her jacket pocket. "You have invited us to what you thought was a peace table, but it was actually a trap designed to eliminate human leadership and demoralize our people." "Precisely," Korath said with satisfaction. "The Confederation has used this technique successfully for centuries. Remove the leaders, scatter the followers, absorb the useful remnants." Lisa pulled out a small communication device and placed it on the table. "There's just one problem with your plan, Admiral." Korath looked puzzled. What problem could there possibly be? Lisa pressed a button on the device and spoke a single word clearly. "Chessboard." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the station, hidden systems activated as Steve Brooks triggered the electronic warfare programs he had quietly installed over the past 3 days. Emergency lighting began flashing as Ben Hayes' carefully placed charges disabled key systems. Amy Walsh released her biological agent into the air circulation system. Most importantly, Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication device. "Message received and confirmed, Ambassador. Admiral Kane sends his regards." Korath stared at the device in confusion. "What is this? What are you doing?" "What we do best," Lisa replied, her diplomatic mask falling away to reveal the steel underneath. "We're turning your trap against you." The main display suddenly changed, showing a very different tactical picture. Human ships were appearing throughout the system, emerging from behind asteroids, decloaking from stealth positions, and dropping their disguises as civilian vessels. The force that materialized was far larger than anything the Zephyrians had expected humanity to possess. "Impossible," Korath breathed. "Our intelligence indicated your fleet was scattered and weak." Ben Hayes stood up from his observer position, no longer pretending to be a passive advisor. Your intelligence was wrong because we fed you exactly what we wanted you to know. Every piece of information you gathered about human fleet positions and capabilities was carefully crafted disinformation. Amy Walsh watched with satisfaction as the Zephyrian delegates began showing signs of neurological impairment. Her biological agent was working exactly as designed, affecting their coordination and decision-making abilities without causing permanent damage. Steve Brooks was already at the conference room's communication panel, his fingers flying over alien controls as he seized command of the station systems. Admiral Kane, this is Lieutenant Commander Brooks. We have control of Nexus Prime's communication array. Admiral Peter Kane's voice filled the room through the station's speakers. Confirmed, Brooks. All human forces are in position and ready to engage. Korath tried to reach his own communication device, but his movements were becoming sluggish as Amy's biological agent took effect. This cannot be happening. The Confederation has never been defeated by a primitive species. That's because you never fought humans before, Lisa said, standing to face the alien admiral. You made the fundamental error of assuming we separate our diplomatic and military functions like civilized species. In reality, every human diplomat is a potential warrior. Every peace negotiation is a potential battlefield. The station shuddered as explosions rocked critical systems throughout the structure. Ben's charges were systematically destroying the defensive weapons and shield generators, leaving the massive station vulnerable to attack. You invited us to a peace table believing it was a trap, Lisa continued. You were right. It was a trap. But it was our trap, and you walked into it willingly. Through the viewports, the Zephyrian fleet was already in chaos. Admiral Kane's forces had struck with perfect coordination, targeting command ships and communication. Relays first. The alien formation, so perfectly arranged for attack, became a liability when enemy forces appeared in their midst. Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system. Ambassador, the Defiance is moving to extract your team. We have a clear path to the docking bay. Negative, Captain, Lisa replied firmly. We're not finished here yet. She looked at Admiral Korath, who was now barely able to stand as the biological agent affected his nervous system. You wanted to use this station as a weapon against humanity. We're going to show you how it's really done. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, staring at the message that had just arrived from Earth Command. 3 years of bloody war across 12 star systems, and now the Zephyrian Confederation wanted to talk peace. The aliens who had been trying to wipe humanity from this sector of space suddenly claimed they wanted to negotiate. Jake read the orders again. He was to escort Ambassador Lisa Carter and her diplomatic team to Nexus Prime, a neutral station, at the edge of contested space. The mission seemed too good to be true, which in Jake's experience usually meant it was. The war had started when human colony ships had encountered Zephyrian patrols near the Kepler system. What should have been first contact had turned into first blood when the aliens opened fire without warning. Since then, humanity had been fighting for its right to exist in this part of the galaxy. Jake walked to the observation deck where Ambassador Carter was reviewing her files. Lisa Carter was not what most people expected from a diplomat. She was tall and athletic, with sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Her background included work in the outer colonies before joining the diplomatic corps. Ambassador, we'll reach him. Nexus Prime in 6 hours, Jake said. Are you sure about this meeting? Lisa looked up from her tablet. The Zephyrians control 7 different alien species and have been the dominant power here for thousands of years. If they want to talk, we need to listen. Even if it's a trap? Especially if it's a trap, Lisa replied with a slight smile. We'll learn more about their intentions either way. The diplomatic team was small but carefully chosen. Colonel Ben Hayes served as military advisor, though his role was supposed to be ceremonial. Ben was a veteran of the Titan campaigns and had never lost a strategic engagement. His presence at peace talks seemed odd to some, but Lisa had specifically requested him. Dr. Amy Walsh was the team's xenobiologist. She had studied every available piece of Zephyrian biology and could read their emotional states through subtle physical changes. Her research had helped human forces adapt their tactics throughout the war. Lieutenant Commander Steve Brooks handled communications and technical systems. He was young but brilliant, capable of understanding alien technology almost as quickly as he encountered it. His job was to ensure secure communications between the delegation and human forces. As the Defiance approached Nexus Prime, Jake studied the massive station through the viewscreen. It was built in the Zephyrian style, all flowing curves and organic shapes that seemed to grow rather than be constructed. The station was supposedly neutral territory, administered by an ancient treaty between various galactic powers. Multiple contacts on sensors, reported his tactical officer. Zephyrian ships, but they're maintaining proper diplomatic distances. Jake nodded, but something felt wrong. The alien ships were positioned too perfectly, their formations too precise for a simple diplomatic escort. He made a mental note to keep the Defiance's weapons ready despite the ceasefire. The delegation transferred to a diplomatic shuttle for the final approach to Nexus Prime. As they docked, they were greeted by a Zephyrian reception committee. The aliens were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They moved like dancers, every gesture flowing into the next. Ambassador Veleth, the Zephyrian representative, welcomed them in perfect English. "We are pleased that humanity has accepted our invitation. The Confederation hopes this marks the beginning of a new era of peace between our peoples." Lisa smiled diplomatically. "The United Earth government shares that hope. We look forward to productive discussions." The humans were escorted to their quarters in the station's diplomatic sector. The rooms were luxurious by human standards, with every comfort provided. Too comfortable, Jake thought. The Zephyrians were trying very hard to make their guests feel welcome. Over dinner, Ambassador Veleth outlined the Confederation's peace proposal. Humanity could keep its current colonies in exchange for recognizing Zephyrian sovereignty over the rest of the sector. There would also be restrictions on human technology development and military expansion. "These terms are quite generous," Veleth said. "The Confederation has rarely offered such favorable conditions to a new species." Ben Hayes leaned forward slightly. "What guarantees do we have that these agreements will be honored?" "The word of the Confederation has held for 3,000 years, Veleth replied. "We are a civilized alliance that values order and stability." Amy Walsh watched the Zephyrian ambassador carefully. Something in his posture suggested stress, despite his calm words. His skin showed the faint color changes that indicated elevated hormone levels in his species. He was nervous about something. Steve Brooks noticed technical details that seemed off. The station's communication arrays were far more active than necessary for simple diplomatic talks. Encrypted transmissions were flowing constantly between the station and points beyond sensor range. After the formal dinner, the human delegation gathered in Lisa's quarters. Jake had swept the room for listening devices, though he assumed the aliens were monitoring them anyway. "What's your assessment?" Lisa asked. Ben spoke first. "The tactical situation doesn't feel right. Those ships out there aren't positioned for escort duty. They're positioned for containment." Amy nodded. "Ambassador Veleth is lying about something. His stress indicators are off the charts, and he's working hard to appear calm." Steve pulled out a small device that showed communication patterns. "There's 10 times more signal traffic than there should be. Someone is coordinating something big." Lisa considered their observations. "So we agree this is likely a trap. The question is what kind of trap and how we respond." Jake checked his chronometer. "I can have the Defiance ready to run in 30 minutes. "No," Lisa said firmly. "If we run now, we learn nothing and gain nothing. We need to find out what they're really planning." Ben raised an eyebrow. "You want to walk deeper into an obvious trap?" "I want to turn their trap against them," Lisa replied. "If the Zephyrians think they can eliminate human leadership through fake diplomacy, let's show them how wrong they are." Over the next hour, they developed their own plan. Jake would maintain contact with the Defiance and be ready for immediate action. Ben would assess the station's defenses and identify weak points. Amy would continue monitoring Zephyrian behavior, for signs of their true intentions. Steve would map the station's systems and establish secure communication channels. Most importantly, Lisa would play her role as naive human diplomat while gathering intelligence on Zephyrian plans. If they wanted to use the peace table as a weapon, she would be ready to turn that weapon against them. As the night cycle began on Nexus Prime, the human delegation prepared for what they now knew would be anything but peaceful negotiations. The Zephyrians had invited them to what they thought was a carefully planned trap, but they had underestimated their guests. Humans had not survived every extinction event on Earth by accepting defeat gracefully. When cornered, they became more dangerous, not less. The aliens were about to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 hours after Admiral Korath had revealed his trap, the space around Nexus Prime was quiet except for the steady work of human salvage teams. The massive Zephyrian fleet that had surrounded the station was now debris and captured vessels. Those alien ships that had managed to escape were scattered across the system, their crews in full retreat. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood in what had been the Zephyrian Command Center, now converted to a human intelligence analysis station. Steve Brooks and his technical teams were systematically extracting every piece of data from the station's computers, while Ben Hayes coordinated with Admiral Kane's forces throughout the system. Final casualty report, Jake Morrison announced as he entered the command center. 17 human ships damaged, none destroyed. 340 Zephyrian vessels destroyed or captured. Admiral Korath is dead. Lisa nodded without surprise. The alien admiral had succumbed to Amy's biological agent, combined with the shock of seeing his entire civilization collapse in a matter of hours. It was not an outcome she had particularly wanted, but it was fitting justice for someone who had planned genocide. "What about the surrender requests?" Lisa asked. Ben Hayes consulted his tablet. "We've received formal surrenders from 6 of the 7 Confederation species, the Altarians, Centauri, Draconians, Vega Collective, Orion Republic, and Tau Ceti. Federation have all withdrawn from the Confederation and requested separate peace negotiations. And the Zephyrians themselves? Their government collapsed 3 hours ago," Steve Brooks reported from his position at the alien computers. "The surviving military commanders are fighting each other for control of what's left of their territory." Dr. Amy Walsh looked up from her medical station where she was treating wounded alien prisoners. "The biological agents are wearing off for most species, but the psychological impact seems permanent. They're genuinely terrified of humans now." Lisa walked to the main display, which now showed the strategic situation across the entire sector. The Zephyrian Confederation, which had dominated this region of space for 3 millennia, had ceased to exist as a functioning government. In its place was chaos as member species scrambled to establish their independence, and former Zephyrian colonies declared autonomy. Admiral Kane is requesting permission to pursue fleeing Zephyrian forces into their home system, Jake reported. "Denied," Lisa said immediately. "We've made our point. Now we need to establish the new order." Ben Hayes raised an eyebrow. "New order?" The old order was based on Zephyrian dominance through military force and careful management of younger species, Lisa explained. "That system is finished. Something has to replace it." Over the next several days, as human forces secured the sector, Lisa began implementing humanity's vision for galactic governance. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had ruled through intimidation and careful control, humans offered something different: protection in exchange for cooperation. The first formal meeting took place aboard Admiral Kane's flagship, the UES Yorktown. Representatives from all 6 former Confederation species were present, along with delegates from several colonies that had declared independence. "The United Earth government proposes the establishment of a new alliance," Lisa announced to the assembled aliens. "Membership will be voluntary, and each species will retain full autonomy over their internal affairs." Ambassador Telleth of the Altarians, a small reptilian species that had been under Zephyrian control for 800 years, spoke first. "What guarantees do we have that humans will not simply replace the Zephyrians as our overlords?" Lisa smiled, understanding the concern. The same guarantee that prevented us from being exterminated by the Zephyrians despite being outnumbered. 1,000 to 1. Human strength comes from our refusal to accept defeat, not from controlling others. Ben Hayes stepped forward to address the military aspects. The Human Defense Alliance will provide protection against external threats and assistance during internal crises, but we will not interfere in your governments or impose our values on your societies. Dr. Walsh presented the scientific cooperation agreements. We propose shared research initiatives, medical assistance, and technological exchange. Humanity has learned much from studying other species, and we believe mutual cooperation benefits everyone. Steve Brooks outlined the communication and trade networks that would bind the alliance together. Open channels for all members, standardized protocols for emergency situations, and fair trade agreements that benefit all participants. The alien representatives exchanged glances, clearly uncertain. They had lived under Zephyrian dominance for so long that the concept of voluntary cooperation was difficult to grasp. What happens to species that choose not to join? Asked Delegate Thorne of the Vega Collective. Nothing, Lisa replied simply. They remain independent and neutral. The only requirement is that they not threaten other species or attempt to conquer their neighbors. Ambassador Kresh of the Draconian Empire, a large warrior species that had been one of the Zephyrians' most reluctant allies, leaned forward. And if they do threaten others? Ben Hayes answered with cold certainty. Then they face the same fate as the Zephyrian Confederation. We demonstrated our capabilities quite clearly at Nexus Prime. The message was received and understood. Humanity was offering cooperation and mutual benefit, but the alternative was the complete destruction they had witnessed. One by one, the former Confederation species agreed to join the Human Defense Alliance. The terms were generous, far more so than anything the Zephyrians had ever offered. Each species retained control of their territory and government, while gaining access to human military protection and technological cooperation. Within a month, the new alliance controlled most of the former Confederation territory. The few remaining Zephyrian holdouts were isolated and increasingly desperate as their former subjects abandoned them for human partnership. Jake Morrison found Lisa in her temporary office aboard the Yorktown, reviewing reports from across the sector. Admiral Kane says the last Zephyrian stronghold has agreed to surrender. That makes it unanimous. Lisa nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. What are they offering? Complete capitulation. They want to join the alliance as a junior member species. Accept their surrender, but with conditions, Lisa decided. Full disclosure of all military assets, war crimes tribunals for anyone involved in planning the Nexus Prime operation, and a probationary period before full membership. Jake sat down across from her. 6 months ago we were fighting for our right to exist in this sector. Now we're the dominant power. Dominant but not dominating, Lisa corrected. That's the difference between us and the Zephyrians. They ruled through fear and control. We're leading through strength and cooperation. Ben Hayes entered the office with a strategic assessment. The transition is going better than expected. Most species are adapting well to the new system. There have been a few minor territorial disputes, but nothing we can't handle through mediation. Amy Walsh joined them with her biological and cultural analysis. The psychological impact of our victory at Nexus Prime continues to resonate. Most species now view humans as protectors rather than threats. The few that don't are keeping their opinions to themselves. Steve Brooks brought the technical reports. Communication networks are fully operational across Alliance space. Trade is increasing rapidly, and we're seeing significant technological exchange between member species. Lisa looked at her team, the same people who had walked into what they knew was a trap just weeks earlier. Any regrets about how we handled the situation? None, Ben said immediately. The Zephyrians chose to use fake diplomacy as cover for genocide. The response was proportional to the threat. Amy nodded agreement. We saved billions of lives by stopping their expansion plans. The intelligence we captured shows they were planning to eliminate at least 12 other species. Steve added his perspective. The new alliance is already more stable than the Confederation ever was. Voluntary cooperation works better than forced submission. Jake raised his glass in a toast to the peace table that became a battlefield, and the diplomats who knew how to fight. As they drank, Lisa reflected on the lessons learned. The galaxy had operated under Zephyrian rules for 3,000 years, but those rules were based on the assumption that military dominance guaranteed political control. Humans had proven that assumption wrong. The new Human Defense Alliance operated on different principles. Strength was used to protect rather than oppress. Technology was shared rather than hoarded. Disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than conquest. But the foundation of it all was the demonstration at Nexus Prime. Every species in the Alliance knew that humans possessed both the capability and willingness to destroy anyone who threatened the peace. The Zephyrian Confederation had learned that lesson too late. Months later, as Lisa prepared to return to Earth, she received a final report from Admiral Kane. The sector is stable. All Alliance members are meeting their obligations. There have been no military incidents in 60 days. What about beyond our borders? Lisa asked. Word of Nexus Prime has spread throughout the galaxy. Several distant powers have sent diplomatic missions requesting non-aggression pacts. No one wants to be the next Zephyrian Confederation. Lisa smiled at the irony.